All right, let's talk about one of the most brilliant and audacious minds in all of military history, Hannibal Barca. We're talking about the Carthaginian general who took a massive army of soldiers, cavalry, and, get this, war elephants, on an impossible journey, all to challenge the might of the Roman Republic. So let's dive in and really break down the genius of the man who brought Rome to its knees.
I mean, just think about that question for a second. How on earth did this one guy, who was almost always outnumbered and fighting deep in enemy territory, manage to outthink and outmaneuver the most powerful, most disciplined military force in the ancient world? Not just once, but over and over again.
So here's how we're going to unpack that. We're going to break his genius down into 5 key parts. We'll start with what I call his impossible gamble. Then we'll look at his overall strategy, the big picture. And after that, his incredible mastery of battlefield tactics. Then, and this is the really cool part, we'll connect those two with something called the genius feedback loop. And finally, we'll touch on why his legacy still endures today.
Okay, first up, the impossible gamble. You see, to really get Hannibal's genius, you have to understand just how backed into a corner he and Carthage were.
So, the setting is the Second Punic War. Now, Carthage had already lost a major war to Rome, and it was a crushing defeat. They lost control of the seas. Rome's navy was dominant, which basically meant Carthage was locked out of Italy. A direct invasion by sea? No way. That would have been a suicide mission. If Carthage was going to have any chance at all, Hannibal needed a plan that was so completely out of the box, so utterly insane, that the Romans would never in a million years see it coming.
And that leads us directly to the first major pillar of his genius, his grand strategy. He figured, if he couldn't get to Italy by sea, well, he'd find another way. He was going to strike right at the heart of Roman power, but by land. This right here shows you exactly how his mind worked. Rome's greatest strength was its navy, which completely controlled the Mediterranean. So what does Hannibal do? He makes this absolutely breathtaking decision to make Rome's greatest strength totally irrelevant. He decided he would march his army the long way around, all the way from Spain, through Gaul, and then over the treacherous Alps, straight into Italy's backyard.
But here's the thing, and this is what's so brilliant. Crossing the Alps wasn't just about sneaking in. It was a strategic masterstroke with multiple goals. Yeah, it bypassed the Roman navy, but it also guaranteed the element of total surprise. He was hoping to convince Rome's allies to switch sides and join him. He also needed to win over the local Gallic tribes to get more troops. And maybe most importantly, he wanted to deliver a massive psychological shock to the Roman people themselves.
But the cost of this plan was just immense. I mean, we are talking about nightmarish terrain, a freezing climate with early snowstorms, and the logistical headache of moving tens of thousands of soldiers, horses, and even war elephants over a mountain range. And you have to remember, this wasn't some unified national army. It was a diverse force of mercenaries, Africans, Spaniards, Gauls. They all spoke different languages. They all had different cultures. Just keeping that army together, keeping them from starving or freezing or just giving up, was a true testament to his incredible leadership.
So, somehow, he gets his battered army into Italy. But that was only half the battle, right? Getting there was the impossible part. Now he had to fight. And this is where his grand strategy sets the stage for his true masterpiece, his absolute, undeniable mastery of the battlefield.
And the ultimate showcase for this is, without a doubt, the Battle of Cannae. Here, Hannibal was facing a Roman army that was way, way bigger than his, and the Romans were feeling confident. They were just going to use their standard brute force tactics to smash right through his center line. But Hannibal wasn't there just to win. He was there to completely annihilate them.
So, it all started with his formation. He put his weaker troops, the Gauls and the Spanish, right in the center, and he had them bulge forward in this crescent shape. Now, to the Romans, this looked like an obvious weak point. It was basically an invitation screaming, "Attack me right here."
So, just as he expected, the Romans charged forward. His center starts to fall back. But here's the trick. It wasn't breaking, it was bending. This was a controlled, deliberate retreat. They slowly gave ground, pulling the Roman legions deeper and deeper into the center, packing them in shoulder to shoulder until they could barely move.
Now, while all of that is happening, Hannibal's much better cavalry on the wings just smashes the Roman cavalry. And then, and this is absolutely crucial, instead of just chasing them off the field like most cavalry would have, they stopped, turned around, and swept behind the Roman infantry.
And right then, the trap snaps shut. You have the Romans completely packed in, with Hannibal's cavalry attacking them from behind. And at that exact moment, His elite African infantry, who he had held in reserve on the sides, they turn inward and slam into the Roman flanks. The Romans were completely surrounded, a perfect double envelopment.
The result was one of the single bloodiest days in all of military history. The Roman army wasn't just defeated, it was effectively erased. To this day, military colleges around the world still study Cannae as the textbook definition of a battle of annihilation.
And you know, Cannae wasn't some one-off lucky shot. This was just what Hannibal did. At the Battle of Trebia, he used a freezing cold river and a hidden ambush to shatter the Romans. At Lake Trasimene, he used the morning fog and the landscape to hide his entire army for one of the biggest and most successful ambushes in history. He was an absolute master of deception, of using the environment itself as a weapon against his enemies.
So we've seen his brilliant big-picture strategy, and we've seen his incredible battlefield tactics. But the thing that makes Hannibal a true legend, the thing that really elevates him, is how he connected the two. And that brings us to what I'm calling the genius feedback loop.
This right here is the absolute core of his genius. You see, for Hannibal, strategy and tactics weren't two different things you worked on separately. They were completely intertwined. They fed off each other in this constant reinforcing cycle. One couldn't exist without the other.
Look at it this way. His audacious strategy of crossing the Alps created the element of total surprise, right? That surprise is what enabled his brilliant tactical victories like Trasimene and Cannae, and those victories, in turn, were what sustained his entire grand strategy. Those wins got him new allies and fresh supplies, and it kept his army's morale from collapsing, which allowed him to stay and fight in Italy for more than a decade. Strategy created the tactical opportunities, and the tactical successes fueled the strategy. It's a perfect loop.
And it's this seamless connection between the grand plan and the flawless execution that really cements his place in history. And that brings us to his enduring legacy.
There's a quote from our source material that just sums it up perfectly. Hannibal saw the whole picture. He understood warfare holistically. The big picture plan and the tiny details of the battlefield, to him they were all just different pieces of the same puzzle.
And that's why, thousands of years later, military academies all over the world are still poring over the details of his campaigns. He's so much more than just a figure from a history book. He's a timeless case study in leadership under pressure, in radical innovation when your back is against the wall, and more than anything, he's the ultimate proof of that unbreakable bond between a brilliant plan and its perfect execution.
And that kind of leaves us with the final question to think about. What is the true mark of genius? Is it just having the brilliant, audacious idea? Is it the skill to execute a single moment perfectly? Or, as Hannibal showed us, is it that incredibly rare ability to masterfully weave the two together?